All right, so I have been in sales and marketing for 25 years, mostly in the medical device space. And I've also studied transformational leadership for a very long time, and I think the two need to merge. So I want to start with a question. My question is, when you're in a conversation or when you're giving a presentation, who is responsible for the message getting across? Is it the speaker or is it the listener?
Common opinion would be it's the speaker's responsibility.
Who says speaker? Who says listener? Who believes in personal accountability? Guess what? The one who's responsible is me. No matter what end of the conversation I'm on, right, Laura? She got it. So, the problem is a lot of people, most people really, all people. So all of us are standing behind the image we're projecting some of the time. Sometimes we actually get real and come out in front of that image and are just ourselves. Most of the time in the business setting, we tend to revert back to that image. Do we look good? Do we look good to our bosses, to our customers, to our coworkers? Are we fulfilling the image we're supposed to be presenting and creating of ourselves? And when we do that, we break connection with the very people we're trying to connect with. And the fact is, the image that we are creating of ourselves is who we really are, only we're hiding behind the image of ourselves rather than being ourselves. Anybody here disagree? Feel free. It's okay to disagree. So what I wanted to do today is to do things a little more experiential. You want to forward that for me? And we just did that. Oh yeah, so in conversation, how many people here are in sales? Anybody? Most of us have to sell something some of the time. So when we're selling, how many people plan out your sales call? How many people are trained in spin selling and other sales techniques? How many people ask needs-generating questions? How many people, when you're presenting and you're preparing your presentation, are planning not just your questions, but your customers' answers? And while you're doing that, and we're trained to do that, and it's actually okay to do that, but first you need to be present so that you can actually listen for the answer rather than listening for the key words that you think they're going to give you. So, when we're listening for these key words and phrases, we tend, sometimes we hit it right, but sometimes we miss some really key information that would be extremely beneficial. And at the same time, we're also really losing that deeper connection we could be getting with our customer. So we're going to advance it for me. Oh yeah, the one other thing I want to talk about is the filters we listen through. And so those keywords and phrases are only one of the filters we listen through. What are some of the filters that affect how we listen to people? Can anybody think of what might affect how you're perceiving what somebody's telling you? Anybody? Throw out something.
Projections in your own life.
Louder?
Projections in your own life.
Life experience? What else?
Prejudice.
Prejudice? Race?
Body language.
Body language, absolutely. What else?
Previous experience with the subject or not.
Yeah. And so there's like 1,000 things that can affect how we perceive the world, other people, etc. And what sometimes we forget is that everybody has different experiences, different race, different gender, different relationships, different past history, different, family. And so a lot of people tend to assume that others think the way they do, and that's just not always true. And so if we really want to connect with the person we're having a conversation with, then what we can do is be aware of our filters first, and then start listening for their filters. And then we get a much better chance of truly listening to their true message, rather than the key things that we're looking for. So now, this is kind of all of that. That's just some of the concepts we could go through in communication that we don't have time for in 30 minutes. We're going to flip it, we're going to go to the back of the room, and we're going to do some exercises. That shield that we put up is to make eye contact. We're going to make eye contact for 30 seconds.
With our partner, or?
Yep, we've already started. I'm going to stop you 6 seconds early. Some of us have failed the experiment already. Now, everybody stop talking for a minute. May I have your attention, please? May I have everyone's attention, please? How difficult was it to just stand there and communicate with eyes only? Okay, it's okay. We get to practice this every day of our lives. Our next practice starts now. Let's try it again.
Are we supposed to be communicating something?
You are only looking in each other's eyes.
No talking.
No talking. There's a lot of talking going on here. Notice how difficult that is. Isn't that difficult? It's crazy, huh? That was the easy part. By the way, when you're speaking in front of the room, you still need to make eye contact. Most people, when they're giving a presentation, look over everybody's heads. They lose our audience connection. Are you connecting with me right now? I'm just giving you every opportunity to look at your phone, talk to each other, do something different. If I take the time to make eye contact, one person at a time, for a couple seconds, for a thought, for a sentence, no matter where in the room you are, and if you're in a big concert hall because you're famous and millions of people are in the room, tens of thousands, you make eye contact with a point in the audience. I notice none of you are talking anymore. You're actually all paying attention now. Feel that difference? So now, a lot of people have difficulty taking and giving critiques or criticism, right? Who likes giving somebody negative criticism or negative feedback? Does anybody here like doing that? If you do, it's okay. You're allowed to like it. Who likes receiving it? Why do you like receiving it?
I mean, if it's constructive, it makes me, do better. If it's just someone who's just, wants to vent at me, then, it's not.
So we can use that feedback, right? If we're open to it, if we're willing to consider it as a possibility. So what we're going to do in the next exercise, I need 2 rows with their backs to that, or 1 row with their back to that plant, 1 row with their back to the door, facing this way. So everybody kind of split the room, line up. So, let's see. Yeah, so face me, like you're lining up for a playground. One in front of the other, in front of the other, stack in front of each other. That's right, fall in line. I'm your military sergeant, fall in line. I'm I'm your military sergeant, fall in line. I'm your military sergeant, fall in line. Fall in line. Get in line. Fall in line. Fall in line. All right. This line gets to give the criticism. Now here's the rub. You're going to want, especially if it's somebody you don't know, you're going to want to give some goofy thing that's not real. Make it real. Because if you don't make it real, nobody's going to get to really experience the exercise. You guys get to read this silently, look the person in the eye, and say thank you. You will say you're welcome. So, this line, start thinking of your criticisms. Find something about her that you think maybe could have been a little different today.
Literal criticisms?
Literal, must be literal. If not, there's no value.
About our looks.
There's
Thank
no
you.
value. It can be anything. Go ahead.
I can take it.
Nice and loud.
Kristen.
Kristen, Kristen, you could have been more appreciative when Mike was talking to you and giving you information about his company.
You can either do it silent or out loud.
Okay. So this is an assessment. You may be grounded or ungrounded. I have not given you permission to make this assessment of me. I am open to having future conversations about this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my printer didn't like this paper very much, so it's a real crappy print. I apologize.
You can use that as a criticism.
All right, let's go.
Lori, I feel like your attire could be more professional today.
Okay.
Less Stephen Lay.
I have not given you permission to make that assessment.
Keep going, the whole thing.
Oh, I have to read the whole
The
thing.
whole thing.
This is an assessment. It may be grounded or ungrounded. I have not given you permission to make that assessment of me, and I am open to having future conversations with you about this. Friends?
Did you say you're welcome?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Dawn.
Nice and loud, so.
Hi. So I feel like you could have worn your name tag a little higher to basically
No, real.
align.
Yes.
I do.
Next. Go to the back of the line.
Just in case.
Yep.
I was paying for her. All right.
Sorry.
I feel like you're giving me a hug up in the front.
Getting harder to be kind of threw you off. I didn't give you much time.
Well,
You may continue.
this is an assessment. Maybe grounded or ungrounded. I'm not giving you permission to make an assessment of me. I'm open to having a future conversation with you about this. You want to hug now?
First, say thank you. Thank you.
Bring it in, bring it in.
Yes.
And you're welcome. Don't forget you're welcome. I'm a Canadian and I have a pet peeve, actually. Americans tend not to say you're welcome. And I took
We say no problem.
Or, so I took these two surgeons in San Diego, and we'd always play tricks. One of them and I would always play tricks on the other. So we said, okay, so somewhere during the surgery, you have to say thank you and see how he responds. If he says you're welcome, I buy drinks. If he says, if he says you're welcome, you buy drinks. If he says I buy drinks. And so the one surgeon during the surgery, he says, can you hand me this instrument? The guy hands it. He goes, thank you. This other surgeon looks at him. He goes, somebody had done that last night.
That's the dream.
All right, guys.
All right.
Okay,
Sock it to me.
Hey Laura, can I give you some feedback today?
Oh, I don't know, am I supposed to? Have I-
Read that?
No, I give permission. I have not given you permission.
Read the whole thing.
Okay. This is an assessment. It may be grounded or ungrounded. I have not given you permission to make this assessment of me. I am open to having future conversation with you about this.
Say thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Oh,
That was
wow.
it. Wait, she didn't say anything. I'll
Oh,
take
did
it.
you tell her what to?
I'll take it.
You didn't
She
hear it.
asked me if she could give me some critique.
I asked her for permission to give
Oh my
me feedback.
goodness. You know what that means, right? This means I wasn't listening.
Oh.
Oh, now I go to the back of the line. Okay, go again. You have
Okay.
to find something new.
Oh,
Okay, so Laura, I enjoyed your presentation today, but even though you are an expert in storytelling, my experience of you was that you were not really vulnerable about your own story. I did not feel very emotionally connected to you.
this is an assessment. I am not giving permission to make this assessment of me. I am open to having future conversation with you about this. Thank you.
You're
That was
welcome.
awesome.
Doesn't that make a difference?
Yeah.
Now, where in the world, in the universe, whatever, where does our identity live as an individual?
In our own mind.
Within ourselves.
Well, we have a perception of ourselves. Where does our identity in the world live? How about, let's try this on. What if it lives in the conversations of others about us? May or may not agree with our perception of us. However, in our work, in our sales presentations, in our communications with our family, if we want to succeed in this image and ourselves coming through it, if we want to really be perceived by our peers, by certain people in a certain way, how can we affect that?
By changing ourselves to their perception.
Nope.
By being vulnerable.
Kind of all of that, but by changing the conversations in the world about us. So if you're concerned about how you're perceived at work, then you need to make sure you're managing the conversation about you at work. And in order to manage that conversation, you better be listening to the feedback that's coming back, whether it comes directly from someone or through someone else. So now all of a sudden you take what criticism used to be really uncomfortable and say, wait a minute, well, but this is valuable to me now. This is really valuable. As a salesperson, one of the things I learned to do was to always ask my customers, how am I doing? Like, what can I do better? What would you like to see different? What am I doing well? Obviously, you do more of what you're doing well. And if you can change some of the other stuff, that might be beneficial. You're probably going to have more business moving forward. Next.
Okay, I'll remember that.
We're here for sales and marketing and presenting yourself. Maybe Jean's doesn't any better experience.
This is an assessment. It may be grounded or ungrounded. I have not given you permission to make this assessment of me. I am open to having future conversations with you about this. Thank you.
Next.
Michael, I feel like you've been on your phone a little bit too much today, and you could have been a little bit more present, so maybe stay off your phone and can see.
This is an assessment. It may be grounded or ungrounded. I have not given you permission to mail this assessment, make this assessment of me. I'm open to having future conversations with you about this.
Okay, so for the next half of the group, we're going to do things a little differently. You know what? Don't worry. Some people might find this easier. Some people actually might find this harder. So the other thing that people really have a hard time with sometimes is receiving a compliment.
Do these have to be fake as well?
I want to know. This is real.
So that's a really important question. Because in order for a compliment to be truly effective and appreciative, it needs to be specific. Oh, hi, yeah, I really like you.
Don't fear it.
It's my turn.
But you know what, I really appreciate your participating and being up here and willing to take part in this. It really, in fact, all of you, I really appreciate how you're all here actively taking part. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Same script, compliment givers.
Okay.
Much better.
We're saying,
we'll say
personally.
I thought it was really nice of you to come up there and fix the video part of Laura's presentation.
Sure. This is a self-assessment. The same screw, right?
Yeah, do it silently now. Read it silently and then say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That feels good.
Hi, Duncan.
Hello.
I wanted to give you a compliment because during lunch we had a really insightful group conversation. And you did a really good job connecting with all those around you, bringing your insight on the industry, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you read that first?
I read it while I was in line.
It's a start. So this is a tool to really help us. So when we have to receive some criticism and maybe it doesn't feel good, it's like, okay, well, it is just an assessment. Is it fact? Maybe. Are they right? Who gave them the right? It's up to us to decide, is this something that we want to really, do we want to use this information? Is this information useful for us? Does it benefit us? Does it hurt us? If it hurts us, rule it off. If it benefits us, we get to use it. What?
Nice and loud.
We have not interacted, so I have to go in more superficial, but you have really cool hair.
What do you like about his hair?
I like that it's curly, but it's got a great cut.
Sorry, this is an assessment. It may be, oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate that.
I don't think this is working. I'm just good. Hey, Chris. I was thinking about what to say. We don't have so much time. But we actually had a good conversation at the beginning of the session, and I was thinking that there's a lot actually to compliment you about. The fact that you are part of this nonprofit that you mentioned that help others with cancer. And it's very noble. It actually wasn't the thing that I wanted to end up with. I think the thing that I wanted to end up with was very specific. It's the fact that not many people have the initiative like you to immediately help someone when all I was simply saying was describing my company, but then immediately you came back and you said, here are the 5 things I can do for you. And I thought that was quite remarkable.
Thank you.
How many people felt that? Who felt that? It's not the same as, fake and superficial. Oh, what a pretty pin on your shirt.
Thank you. Hi, Dr. Upha. Thank you for coming to this event. Your presentation was an absolute pleasure. I get to, witness those presentations pretty often since I work with him. But I do want to tell you that you're a really important person at the firm. You really make it a different experience for me because aside from all your knowledge, you're really like a mentor, not only in the amazing lawyer that you are, but also the amazing father that I've witnessed you as, and how amazing you are with your wife, Grace. I just want to say that at the end of the day, you're my mentor every single day.
Thank you for this well-grounded assessment that I give you permission to. I hope we'll have more of this future in the conversation when we drive back home.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
What if you could start interacting with your customers and your coworkers in a somewhat similar fashion every day? How would your world be? How much would you love your job? How much would you enjoy your work? Any takeaways from me? Who wants the mic? We've got about 2 minutes.
You know, I heard something one time, and I thought it was really a silly catchphrase.
Do we need this? Can we all hear?
And somebody said everything lives and dies in communication, and I thought that was kind of silly, but whether it be verbal, nonverbal, everything does live and die in conversation. So you
Companies
have to
live
make,
and die in conversation. Employees' futures die due to lack of communication from their superiors about what they would like them to change. You know, how many people fire an employee because, they don't know why, they're just not quite doing it. You know what? You failed as an employer, potentially, if you didn't really talk to that employee and find out, you know, what's going on. Maybe they weren't the right employee. Maybe they needed a different position. Maybe they needed help transitioning to a different career that was of interest to them and you didn't know about it. So, I mean, there's so many ways that communication can kill a company or allow it to thrive. And likewise with the individuals in the company. They can destroy their future. Lack of communication can destroy their future, or it can build it up. So let's take care of each other in our corporations. Other feedback? Yes.
Well, either on the critiquing side or giving or taking receiving a compliment, those are intimate moments, and culturally and individually we avoid intimacy. And so to step into the plate of management, you really have to be willing to be intimate with people. And I'm not sure companies prepare employees to go up the ladder to be intimate. That's what that is.
Well, that's why I think this industry needs transformational training in addition to their spin selling. Here's how you. I mean, all that stuff's good. Don't get me wrong. Like knowing how to ask needs questions and how to really draw the information from your customers is really important. But how we utilize that information, how we utilize just all the communication within our company is so important. And yeah, you kind of got to be willing to be a little vulnerable if you really want to go to that next level.
So I have a comment.
Uh-huh.
So I had a group of salespeople with a company that I work for in Texas. I had about 60 salespeople in Texas, big state, a lot of hospitals. And of the 60 people, I had 7 that were 7-figure earners.
Yeah.
And so I'd have my meeting and I'd ask, and there was one guy who's now the EVP of sales of this company I work for. Great guy. And so I'd go around the room and I'd ask, what's making you successful, what's not making you successful. And this one guy came with an answer that kind of floored me at that point. I didn't really understand it until a couple of years later. He said, when I talk to my customers, the first thing I ask them is, what can I do for them today? And he came with everything with love, and that's how he sold and positioned himself. And that was an important message that I got from a guy 20 years ago, and that's how he approached his business, and he made a shitload of money.
Thank you for sharing that.
This is the most fun I've had since a long time. One of these events.